Dartmouth, and I study ceramics. So I'm going to bring you back to the very beginning when I was first accepted into this program. I was very excited to get my acceptance letter and very eager to move out east. I'm originally from Iowa, so I've never lived anywhere else except for the very middle of the Midwest. So moving to the East Coast was a very big change for me. As though I was excited, I was also very nervous. I'm nervous right now. But there was this sort of dread that was building inside of me as I first received that acceptance letter. I was worried that I did not necessarily have the talent or the skills to be a part of a program like this. But I continued on. I moved out here with my husband, and I started classes, and I was really looking inward to try and figure out what it is that I wanted to make art about. What is it about me that I felt was important and that I could say that could connect with other people in the world? So I thought back to my childhood, back to Iowa, and what was it, that I belonged to, and I thought of womanhood. I grew up in a household full of women. I have 3 sisters, I have a mother, a grandmother, and we only were allowed to buy female dogs in my house. So everything was very based around being a lady in my house. So when I got here, I started to make work based on the female figure, and I made work that was talking about layers, that made up certain traits that could make up a whole female. But as my time progressed throughout that first semester here at UMass, that dread was still there. That dread began to build inside of me. I soon figured out that there was a name for that, which is imposter syndrome. The feeling that I would soon be found out, or the notion that someone would maybe want to kick me out of the program, finding out that I don't actually belong here. So that followed me around from class to class, day to day, moment to moment. So I really thought to myself, I should be making work about this instead of the whole womanhood thing. Although that was very important to me, and it still is, I felt that this idea could span across all people, no matter the gender, the race, the ethnicity, no matter what. So after thinking about that, I moved on to thinking about the topic of skin. Because I was really focusing on how do we as humans communicate emotion. We communicate verbally, we communicate through body language, but skin is something that we use, or that more it uses us, to communicate our emotion without our permission. I like to say that it betrays us. It tells our emotion to those beyond that we're not necessarily willing to share. So all of you are looking at me right now, and I may be a little embarrassed. My face may be comparable to a tomato. But you're understanding that emotion that I'm feeling. So from there, I took a deep dive into a material study. Thanks to Professor Hutchinson, I did an independent study trying to figure out what material best can convey skin. I started with learning how to make paper using pulps and glues. I want to quickly pass this around so that you can get a feel for what my work actually feels like, since you're not allowed to touch the work in the gallery. But from there, I started using a mixture of onion skin pulp and Elmer's clear glue. I started there because I liked the transparency of the material, and I liked that I could almost cast it, similar to silicone. I started off with gallons and gallons of this glue that I would put on the floor in really large sheets, and then I would get down on my hands and knees and peel that glue up off the floor. So there's this idea of the anxiety of picking and pulling this material up off the floor and having this really large sheet that I could then use for other projects. If you go out into the hallway after the talks are over, you'll see a video out in the hall, in the Bubbler Gallery, of a work that I did where I covered the entire desk, a school desk, in Elmer's glue, and then I sat down at that desk until I had completely picked all of the glue off of the surface. But from there, I decided to use a material that was a little bit more fleshy. My words aren't necessarily academic approved. I like to say that I'm a from there, I thought that silicone was really the best material because it gave that appearance of skin. It's transparent, much like the glue, but it added this body to it. It added more flesh. So the forms that you're looking at right now, I approach the wheel each day with a specific mood or emotion. And so each piece was built in a day or two with that same emotion in mind. And then I would put them in the kiln and bisque fire them, which means firing to a fairly low temperature so that the material remains fairly porous and very accepting of that silicone material that I would then add after the firing is over. Each piece that you see here has about 10 to 20 different layers of silicone on it, so when you touch it, it's quite squishy, more so in other areas. But there were certain mistakes that would occur as I was applying that material. There would be drips and cuts and maybe weird things like dog hairs that would appear in the sculpture. So I would then return after the material had been fixed, and I would fillet those little areas out, and then return with the medical sutures and aggressively pull that material back together. So I think of that as moments of trauma or moments of extreme emotion that can remain on the skin, much like our own bodies when we scar or have wounds. Just kind of constant reminders of the specific emotions that are emerging out of our bodies. So thank you all very much for listening, and if you have any questions.